This is another talk in the series of Westhaven talks by me, Neshi Rodin. So we're going to talk about soulmates. We talked about when God created the world. So we go back to the beginning, and when God decided, or the Lord decided that he's going to create human beings, he wants human beings who will relate to him and who will connect with him. And so what he did was he created something called Adam Kadmon. Adam, if you know anything about the Bible, Adam was the first man, his wife was the first woman, Adam and Eve. And Adam Kadmon, the word Kadmon means primordial, the first, the original human being that ever existed. Now, let's talk about a human being. A human being has different energetic places in himself, and different aspects of himself that are located in different physical places. In your brain, there are 3 intellectual powers, which you're not going to talk about right now specifically. In the rest of your body, there are emotional powers, and finally, you have the physical power. And what happens is your intellect divides into one part that makes a concept, one part that elaborates on the concept, and one part that puts the 2 pieces of concepts together so you have actually an articulated idea. Then when you look at the body, the first attribute that we see, or the first emotion, is called the emotion of kindness. It's also called love. It's not the same kind of emotions that we think about. It's the right hand or the right arm is called chesed. Chesed means the ability to draw close, to bring to you. The next, it's also, there are different names for these, but the next attribute is the attribute that's contained in your left hand, and that's called the attribute of gevura, which is strictness and discipline. And so on, these other things go through your body. There's a part inside your chest, there's the left leg, there's the right leg, there's your stomach or your tummy, whatever you want, and so on. In fact, there's 10 different attributes. Now, we're talking about soulmates. In the original man, there was the basis for all the human beings that could exist in the world ever. So you would have, say that you had a person who was very, very, very intellectual. And when he looked at things, or she looked at things, she would approach it from an intellectual concept, an intellectual point of view. That means her soul, the root of her soul, the root of his soul, came from the intellect. Then you have, say, another person who's very kind. They're just very open-hearted and loving. They want to give and take care of people. The root of their soul comes from the emotional attribute, or the attribute called chesed, of kindness, which is located in the hand. These are very, very general terms, and if you follow me further for many years, we'll get to more specific and more particular over time, but I want to just give you a touch of these concepts. If you go along and you meet somebody, and that person you just understand, and they understand you, and you don't have to talk a lot, you just open your mouth, say a word, and they understand you, that's called your soulmate. If you meet somebody and they don't understand you whatsoever, they are from another part of Adam Kadmon. For example, you may be very intellectual. They have this thing now, I think, on YouTube, in which there's a group of intellectuals, computer experts, and they're working with somebody who is an emotional person, and they don't understand, they don't use the terms, they don't use the language the same way at all. If you meet somebody who's from the intellectual world, and you're from the world of kindness, or you're from the world of restriction, you may not get along. You may not get along because the root of your soul is different. In the beginning, when God created the world, he made each attribute completely separate. So the attribute of intellect was completely separate, didn't have anything to do with the attribute of kindness, didn't have anything to do with the attribute of strength and victory, which is the right leg, strength and victory. So that if a person who was interested in victory and winning met an intellectual person, they had nothing to do with each other. They couldn't speak the same language. And Hashem thought, as it were. Hashem said, this is not going to work. If we're going to have people that are so different from each other, and they can't even communicate with each other, there's going to be constant fighting, constant confusion. So what he did was, he said, okay, you're going to be, the main attribute you have is intellect. But you're going to have a little bit of everything else. You'll have a little bit of kindness, a little bit of the desire for victory, a little bit of the desire for compliance and cooperation, so that at least you'll be able to have a basis for which people of different origins in the original human being, the original Adam, they'll have a basis for conversation, a basis for talking. So when you meet somebody that comes from the same place in Adam Kadmon, remember I said that we're just going to do general? Well, let's say you come from not just the arm of kindness, but not just the hand of kindness, not just the finger of kindness, but the fingernail of kindness. And you meet another person that comes from the fingernail of kindness. Their soul, their root of their soul comes from that part of the original human being. You're a soulmate with that person because you understand them and they understand you. Now, let's say you meet somebody who comes from the intellectual part of Adam, and you come from the fingernail. You can still get on with each other. You can still work at it. And you know what? Sometimes you get married to each other. And it's difficult to get on with each other sometimes because you don't speak the same language. You have to learn what they mean by this concept and what they mean by that concept. I have a friend who says, now her husband understands when she says to him, could you get the thingy over there underneath of that? And before they were married, he would never have understood what she was saying. And now he says, yeah, I'll just go over there and I'll get that thing. Is this the thing? He understood how to talk to her in her kind of language. Now, your children, if you get married, your children may not be from that same part of the Adam Kadmon, but they will have a little piece of everything, and that's how we can get on. It says now, in this generation, when we have cell phones and we have internet, you may meet a person in China, in Kuwait, in India that you would never have met before, and they are your soulmate. And there's something really incredibly special about connecting to your soulmate. So that's what the situation is. You don't necessarily marry them. You don't necessarily meet them. You don't necessarily have children like them. Your boss may be completely different. But when you meet that person and they're your soulmate, there's something incredibly special about it. So we'll talk to you later. That's the end of this session.